This episode I think I want to open with a joke, and before I even do that I need to put this on the screen, which will set the tone pretty much for the rest of the show. You build 1,000 bridges and nobody calls you Joe the Bridge Builder. You mend 1,000 fences and nobody calls you Joe the Fence Mender. But you fuck one goat. But I suppose I should begin this episode with a true story. I was having dinner with my brother-in-law some time ago. We get along really well, he's a good guy. And he said, well, what do you do for fun? I said, well, sometimes I play MMOs, this, that, and the other thing. He said, oh, MMOs, you mean kind of like this?
Honey, you've got Cheetos in your hair.
Oh, thanks.
This is the actual scene he referenced, and asked me if gamers were really like this. To be honest, I don't know any serious gamer who will even eat Cheetos. I mean, the cheese powder on the fingers is a liability in a battleground, but that stereotype sticks. I did an informal poll on Facebook among groups of friends asking them what they thought of the typical gamer. The answers were varied and interesting to say the least, and not all negative, surprisingly. A few cut a little close to the bone. But they were all really telling about the stereotype. But I think at this point we need to set up a baseline. For the sake of this discussion, we need to have an agreement on the term stereotype. It's a tool that we all use to interact with the world, using collective knowledge of a group to judge how we will deal with an individual representative of that group. Stereotypes are lazy, in that it's guessing what an individual's reactions will be based on what seems to be common knowledge about the group they're associated with. And we're kind of reaching the point that it's going to be very difficult to talk about stereotypes without offending someone. Let's try a different tactic. Huskies!
Mishka, you want potatoes?
Potatoes.
She wants potatoes!
Wow, Huskies are sure talkative, aren't they? Yep, they just love to talk and sing all the time. Okay, well, not all Huskies do this, but enough do to make it worth noting to anyone who's interested in having a walking shed ball for a pet. And they shed a lot. It's not a stereotype, it's just genetics. On a more human scale, stereotypes can be based on any group of people, on anything. Where they're from, what sports teams they like, what they do for fun, what they happen to be a fan of. All of these things breed stereotypes, and being human, we tend to associate the most extreme of that group as being the norm. So if I say Trekkie, what you think is this, in reality it's more like this. But since we only see the most extreme fans as Trekkies, we tend to associate all Star Trek fans with that low percentage. I am way oversimplifying this, I know, and as much as I want to cut to the chase, I need to set up a few things for the rest of this to make sense. To understand stereotypes, you need to understand what most people are exposed to, and they base their beliefs based on that small sample of the culture as a whole. This is why in past shows I said that stereotypes come from somewhere. Stereotypes are not based on facts, but they do have a basis in something. Which brings me to gamer culture. Gaming is still a fairly new phenomena, so most of the stereotypes are actually brought on from mass media outlets. But what really bothers me are the stereotypes that are brought on from within the gaming community about itself. And the one of those that really bothers me the most? We're all really angry. Angry video game nerd, Angry Joe, 0 punctuation. It's almost impossible to find a video game reviewer who isn't angry. And then we have the freakout videos that always go viral.
Hey, I know you're part of the motherfuckers! You fucking stole my clown song! If I ever find out where you live, I'm gonna fucking kill you! What the fuck was that shit?!
Now here's one's gonna twist your noodle into a knot. Out of those last couple videos I showed you, which ones were actual freakouts, and which ones were acting? I really do get why these are popular, but that's not why I bring them up. Most of the freakout videos are fake, but it perpetuates a stereotype of gamers being rage-filled. I think this comes from another stereotype of gamers being prepubescent males. The idea is that going through puberty, I guess, causes the pituitary gland to secrete the nerd rage hormone. I don't know. Even then, that stereotype isn't true either. According to the Entertainment Software Association, the average gamer is 30 years old, and 68% of gamers are over 18. We're going to be coming back to this webpage a few times, so I'm going to keep this handy. When I say things like this, I'm talking about all gamers. Not just MMO players, not just fighting game players, all gamers, because when people talk about gamers, they lump us all together. They lump us in with the guys who play Farmville. Although, actually, come to think of it, I could make a decent argument that Farmville and other social media games are actually MMOs. Let the hate comments begin. I'm sidetracking again. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about stereotypes. One I really wanted to hit was the basement dweller. This one I can trace back to the early days of computers. When a family had a personal computer, it was a pretty big deal way back when. It would have to be put someplace in the house that it could be used by everyone, but couldn't be in the way of the rest of the house, so oftentimes it was put into the basement. And you can pretty much guess the rest from there. Now you've got phone apps that make gaming mobile, so most gamers don't sit in the basement. In fact, the ESA says 33% of all gamers play on smartphones, and yet the basement dweller myth persists. This is the power of the stereotype. Even when it's obvious that it's not true, it keeps going. Well, why? It goes back to the nature of stereotypes. Our brains want to categorize people into a tiny little box and then be done processing information on that person. And locking them into a stereotype is the easiest way to do that, even if it's patently untrue. But what if it's not an outdated notion or something that is completely fabricated? What if you can point to something and say, yes, there it is, staring you in the face, you can't avoid this any longer? This actually brings me to one other stereotype that kind of ties into the last couple of episodes that I've been doing. Gamers are a fairly exclusive club.
The sexual harassment is part of a culture. And if you remove that from the fighting game community, it's not the fighting game community, it's StarCraft.
When I singled out this clip, I got a lot of comments on it, on how it was an isolated incident, or it was out of context, or how it's a stereotype. But the thing is, well, let me introduce you to a website called Fat, Ugly, or Slutty. It's run by women gamers who got tired of the abuse they got online simply for being female, so they decided to post up what they had to deal with. If the site wasn't updated almost daily, I would probably agree that these are isolated incidents, but okay, yeah, some of the comments there just make you shake your head and wonder what these men are thinking. Yeah, men. The stereotype is that most of these comments come from 12-year-old, but the ESA begs to differ. As I said before, 68% of gamers are 18 or older according to their research. And the ladies of Fat, Ugly, or Slutty can provide proof that it is mostly grown men.
Fuck you stupid, fat, silly bitch.
Now this stereotype I can probably trace back to the origins of computers, where there really were no women involved, so gaming has kind of evolved into a men's club, and apparently a lot of male gamers want it to remain a boys-only club. But it's not just about excluding women.
The beauty of the fighting game community, and you should know this, is that it's based around not being welcomed.
I can easily extend this attitude to anyone who isn't as hardcore as the person making the comments. GTFO and L2P are the answers of choice. They seem to want to run you off rather than waste time on teaching you how to play their game. Thing is, I know this isn't true. As I've said before, I've met a lot of really cool people playing MMOs who are happy to help you in any way that they can. But I've also run into dozens, if not feeling like hundreds, of people who will just as swiftly want you to GTFO noob. And yet, the stereotype persists. Why? Well, it goes back to that joke I told at the beginning of the show. It only takes one. It only takes one person to make the stereotype 100% real to everybody else, and they can point and say, see, there it is, right there, validation. Say whatever you guys want to. Here's your goat.
To be honest, I know Aaron. So if you told him to fuck off and stop doing that, he would stop doing it.
You don't know where the line is.
Well, my line is SoCal's line. And in SoCal...
I have so many friends in SoCal.
No, my point is... No, my point is... Okay, well, repeat it 4 times before I get my turn.
He's not sexist. He makes jokes and calls all day. He's really not that sexist. Like, he's not a kid sexist.
You need to be able to play when people are harassing you.
Thanks for that, Eris.
Take off your shirt.
I know, Eris is getting blown up looking like a really, really bad guy, but he's actually not that bad.
The sexual harassment is part of a culture. And if you remove that from the fighting game community, it's not the fighting game community, it's StarCraft. And there's nothing wrong with StarCraft if you enjoy it. And there's nothing wrong with anything about esports. But why would you want just one flavor of ice cream? You know, there's esports for people who like esports, and there's fighting games for people who like spicy food and like to have fun. And I know what you want is to turn fighting games into something huge and something that everyone can like, that a family can enjoy, that you can watch with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever, but you can't do that.
And through silence or apologetics, the gaming community has agreed with him. When I put out the original video, I got a lot of flack from people telling me I needed to look deeper and watch hours of footage to see the real situation, but here's the truth of the matter, guys. To the public at large, he has just spoken for all gamers everywhere. And since he's doing so uncontested, he's our unofficial voice to the outside world that's being taken as the official one. He validates every negative stereotype out there and blankets the gaming community as a whole. Am I demonizing Harris in this? No, I'm just stating the truth. I don't know if this was a character that he kind of developed for the show, or if he was just gaming the competition, or what. All I know is that people outside of the gaming circles are going to look at this guy and go, oh, that must be the norm, because he was ultimately rewarded for what he was doing. Okay, hang on a second, hang on, this is getting way too negative. Let's talk solutions. One of the reasons that stereotypes persist is that it's profitable to keep them going. Cross Assault, good example. Some people stated that Eris was allowed to act as he did because it brought in ratings to the show. And I'm tempted to believe this, as Capcom really didn't do anything until they released an empty statement about equality pretty much after the show was over. I think the fighting game community missed an opportunity to make a statement here, however. Capcom's sales figures were a measly 1.4 million units sold in the first few months of the Street Fighter vs. Tekken release, and they blame the low sales on market saturation. But what if the fighting game community were to collectively say, we watched Cross Assault and we decided not to buy your game solely on how you let your players treat women? And what if Capcom lost 250,000 sales due to their silent condoning of this behavior? And what if every player who chose to not buy this game for that reason were to write one email to the company saying, we're not going to buy any more of your products because of this? It would send a clear message to the gaming industry, one that would pretty much rattle them to the core, because that's a lot of money. Don't think that these companies act on what's right or what's wrong. They act on their own bottom line. If they see a significant loss of sales due solely to their players' attitudes, you better believe there would be changes. But the truth is, players won't do this. The truth is that most players don't care to change the stereotype. In fact, many are just happy to wallow in it, even if it's detrimental to the hobby that they do. You know, when I was talking to my brother-in-law and he mentioned Big Bang Theory, I took the time to correct him, and I said, no, that's not the way it is. It's a funny show, but it's fiction. That's not the way it really is. And he understood where I was coming from, and that's how you change stereotypes, through action. And if you see somebody else perpetrating the stereotype, you can correct their actions. It's really that simple.